Hey everyone, I'm David Petrangelo with a really quick intro for you for the interview you're about to see, and here with Melissa Burns of Esport Canada. Now, I decided to reach out to the not-for-profit to talk about the exciting news that the Olympics are bringing forth and officially holding an esports competition week at the end of June of 2023. They're going to be doing 9 different sports and games, including motorsports and using Gran Turismo. They're going to be doing cycling, tennis, baseball, chess. But I wanted to talk to Melissa and Esport Canada about not only what this could mean for esports now, but what it means for the education and the growth of esports for generations going forward. So without further ado, I won't talk your ear off for too long. Let's get into the interview and welcome Melissa to Console Creatures. Let's start from the beginning. Let's talk about a little bit about yourself and a little bit how you sort of took the path to becoming a part of Esport Canada.
Of course. Well, I'm a lifelong gamer. I've always played games. I am old enough to have gone through many, many generations of consoles. And it's just always been something that I've really enjoyed doing. But I've also been really involved in lots of other aspects of competition. And something that drew me to esports was that it was this really fun combination of my interests where I had always been really into individual sports. I had done some swimming. I've been a marathon runner, never at a high level, but that's always been kind of my outlet. And so esports is this really cool opportunity to be able to combine some of those interests where I take my love of gaming and my love of competition and be able to put those together. But I am also an educator. So I work in Winnipeg as an instructional support coach. I've been in the classroom for many years and now work with teachers. And originally, I had actually introduced esports as an opportunity for my students to connect and have opportunities to do something at school where I was able to build relationships with them that showed that I was able to honor something that was really important to them and that their interests were of value in that space. And so I had actually started the school-based program back in 2016. And it grew really quickly because at first what was all about relationships, which we know is foundational to a really healthy learning environment, became so much more when I realized how much further I could take that and extend their actual curricular learning through esports. And so one thing led to another where this small program I started in my school became a provincial school esports association, which prior to the pandemic actually ended up becoming a national organization. So Esport Canada was founded as an organization for Canadian educators to bring esports to Canadian students. And through the pandemic, we saw the value and importance of that because we saw a lot of for-profit American companies that were coming into the Canadian education system and pitching this as an untapped market that they could really capitalize on. And we wanted to make sure that the values and even further to the conversation we're going to be having, that spirit of the Olympics was kept and maintained in the integrity of the work we had been doing in that space. Fast forward a few years, and we had been approached by a few different places in government, from hospitality and tourism, esports industry, who had been following the work we had been doing in the education space, and asked us to expand into the amateur to professional space. And we took that opportunity to find it as a pathway for our students to be able to continue their passion and to find even more greater avenues for them to extend that learning and that development. And just shortly after those conversations happened, we were also approached by a number of Canadian universities and colleges who asked us to also be the home of post-secondary gaming for varsity competition. And so now we have this incredible group of people, educators, professionals, this incredible cross-section of stakeholders in the Canadian esports ecosystem, all invested in this unifying vision of creating opportunities to support and develop the Canadian esports ecosystem.
Amazing. I mean, so, you know, a lot of the basis from your experience, like you said, and of Esport Canada in general, is the education part of it. It's not just, hey, here's an opportunity for kids to play games at a time when they, you know, would otherwise have their nose in a textbook, so to speak. You know, that's not really, I think there's like a perception about games and esports and all that kind of stuff that is just it's still early, it's still very young and everything. So Esport Canada has a lot going for it there, like as you mentioned. So how do you sort of I guess portray something like this to someone who may have questions about, is this really serious? Is this really worth my kid's time? How valuable could this possibly be, for education? Because especially with post-secondary, it costs a lot of money to send your kid to school or for the kid to
Of course.
have loans and everything. So there's a lot going on there. So how does that messaging go through, and what's sort of the not struggle, but what's sort of the tasks that need to come at play when you are sort of pitching Esport Canada and the seriousness of what this could be going forward for all ages, really, not just post-secondary. Yeah.
Of course. Well, and I think that's where our understanding of learning and the neuroscience behind learning really has taken off and really supported the work that we're doing with esports in schools. Because right now we're in a bit of a paradigm shift where we're seeing so many jobs becoming automated. And what we really want to do is we want to prepare our students with the skills, transferable skills that they need to have jobs that don't even exist today. And so what we're doing with esports in schools is we're allowing them the opportunity to develop those soft skills, to develop something in the education world we consider to be global competencies. So things like communication, collaboration, critical thinking. Games and esports ask our students to make a lot of really quick choices and demand that they develop their problem solving skills in community with others. It's not in isolation. And so that was one of the things that drew me to esports and education at the beginning, was that rather than this stereotype of a kid playing alone at home, that we were giving them a physical community to be part of and to grow with and to learn with. And that was really a pivotal moment for the early stages of development. But now with all of the neuroscience coming out about how esports really does benefit, there's a really cool study that came out actually just in October that benefits cognitive development, that this is helping our students with their learning as well. It is much more than just a game. And I think that right now a big focus for us in the work that we're doing is building capacity among educators to understand how to approach games in schools to maximize their potential and their benefit for student learning.
Right. And I think, like I mentioned before, it's still, or like games are still young in general, and then using gaming and experiences that you have through that is young as well. Right. So it is a process and everything, but you touch on a lot of advantages of just what sports are in general. I mean, for me, yeah,
Absolutely.
I don't play professional sports. I don't, I don't even play, I don't play professional esports, any of that stuff. But every time I think back to good friends that I have and still have, and what I learned as a person and growing up, a lot of it came from sports, whether it was something that I played at school or whether it was extracurriculars, like hockey and soccer and all that. So that's a big value to what esports can bring in general. And I guess that's a key component, right? That's really what we're getting at.
And to build on that, what
Right.
we're seeing from the statistics is that 89%, this is an old statistic, this is from 2020, but 89% of students between the ages of 8 to 17 are gaming regularly. And I would say that by all accounts, I'd say that's actually pretty low estimate. But when we know that it's such a large section of our population, of our young population, that is participating in this form of entertainment, we want to help them transition from just seeing it as entertainment to becoming critical in their interactions with it and thinking about what they are doing in those spaces. But beyond that, it's also this really incredible opportunity that I found for a cross section of our students to interact with each other that normally wouldn't, because you have sports outlets for some of the students that do sports, you have music and theater and arts for those that are interested in that. And then you've got this group of students that typically just go home and play games. We've given them that physical space, but because all of our students are gamers and all of them are participating in this, you're getting all of those students from different interests and different backgrounds working together in the same space and learning how to find commonalities and how to unite their interests through this one avenue. And it's such an incredible thing to witness and to build on.
Yeah, and I find, I mean, personal anecdote for me to tell you is like I know that through the years, as games have become less about sitting on the couch beside your brother, your cousin, your friend, and being online and everything, I even going to college, going to university, and having a certain group of people that I knew were gamers like I was, like those were the people that I connected with. It wasn't really about the game. It wasn't really about any of the quote unquote skill that I was using with my fingers and thumbs to play on the computer or with a controller. It was more the development of friendship, the development of connection and everything. And I think that's a key piece. Personally, I think that's a key piece. And what you're touching on in studies and stuff as well is that, and it does go deeper than this, but a personal connection is something that is important. And over the last few years, it is very obvious that a lot of people were yearning for that and needed that in a lot of really valuable ways. So
absolutely.
I want to touch on I want to shift over to talking about this Olympic competition week that's coming up in June. And there's a lot of what Esport Canada and yourself are doing. How does that translate into like news like this that's coming up? Is this like a are you guys celebrating and thinking like, yes, this is just another opportunity for us to sort of push forward and be a part of something like this? I know it's not really, the Olympic part of it isn't necessarily like the education, but it is more a sport competition. But I'm assuming that this is, positive news going forward and something that you can sort of build upon from there.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that even with that, the Olympics are still very much part of the education space as well, because that's where they're learning and developing all of those skills and those passions and those interests. And it's that spirit of the Olympics that really drives competition. But the thing that I've always really enjoyed about the Olympics is that not only is it the largest competitive platform globally, it is also this celebration of participation and this celebration of diversity and this striving for excellence, which are all really incredible characteristics. And I think that this announcement allows us to potentially reach even more people by allowing for even more diverse experiences through the Olympics themselves. But it's also a really great way to open the door to future dialogue, not only with the IOC and the Canadian Olympic Committee, because we would love for those conversations to be even more regular in the future, but that it's also an opportunity for us to connect with the general public, because there are still a lot of misconceptions around what esports are even, and the joke about how do you spell esports is definitely something that has come up many, many times. And so this is just another opportunity for us to have those conversations and enter dialogue.
Now, do you think that this is sort of a question that's more about the games themselves, I guess? But there's a small set of games so far that they're working within. There's archery, there's cycling, there's Just Dance, which I think is sort of the more, I guess you could call, traditional game. I think out of the group, or at least the most well known, I would say, to the general population, or more general gamer may recognize that. But there's a lot of different types of games within this small set. But is this could this just be the starting point, or do you think like is League going to be something that comes in at some point? Like, is this just the building blocks, I guess?
Well, League of Legends is my sport of choice, so I mean, I'd be all about that. I think that there was a lot of general surprise from the gaming community, especially given the titles that they had featured in the Commonwealth Esports Week last summer. So we saw Dota 2 and Rocket League as titles. So I think most had anticipated those kinds of titles, but regardless of what titles they've offered and the surprise that we may feel, I do still think that this is a stepping stone and it's a starting point. And I think that it really opens the opportunity for more dialogue about what titles can be included in the future.
Right. And I guess, League as an example, or MOBAs like that, of any kind. Mine, sadly, it was Heroes of the Storm, but it is. Yeah, I mean, it's still running, but as far as playing it,
absolutely,
yeah, it's still there, and it's still installed like 5-6 years later. It's still on my computer.
It's a good same.
It's amazing. It was just my cup of tea. I like the whole, having shared XP as a team instead of individual.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of the item system and some of the others, but anyways, anecdote, off on a tangent. But games like that, where it is very team based, we see multiple competitions worth millions of dollars every year. Now, does that help those potentially be introduced into something like of a larger, competition like an Olympics, or something that isn't necessarily run by Riot or Valve or anything like that? Like, would that help, or do you think they're going to potentially, it's sort of an opinion question, obviously, but do you think that it's going to be more traditional and more like, oh, it's cycling, oh, it's archery? What do you think?
I think that this is just a starting point, and given the track record of previous titles that have been offered, I think they're still exploring the space, and I think that finding that balance, because I think there's space for lots of different kinds of games. Finding that balance is going to happen through dialogue and conversation. It's going to be about opening those doors of communication and allowing multiple voices to be heard, and I think that that's really going to shape the direction of gaming in these kinds of events in the future.
And for sure, you touched on it with previous answers when we first sort of got started here with Esport Canada and yourself. But how do you use news like this, saying like, look, it's recognized to the level of the IOC, it's recognized to the level of Olympics esport. How do you use that going forward for younger generations of saying, this is important, whether someone plays at a really high level and they really, use that as a career or anything like that? How do you use something like this and say like, look, we need to expand upon this and keep pushing forward, because this is something that can be really valuable in multiple ways, as someone who's even just 10 years old can work on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that anytime you attach the Olympic name to any sort of competition, it automatically brings a level of credibility. And I think that at this point, it also adds a layer of curiosity, that people don't really understand what esports are at this point. There is definitely a lot of people who do, which we can see by the incredible viewership numbers that we get from some of the major events. And so I think that there is a large group that do get it, but it allows them to have a conversation with people who are just starting to explore what that means, and start to break down some of the misconceptions around what esports are, and start to break down stereotypes as well. Even myself as a gamer often am mislabeled because I don't fit what some people would consider to be the gamer stereotype. And I think that this is a really great opportunity for us to be able to have those conversations.
Okay, so let's talk about yourself again for just a sec here.
Okay.
You mentioned it. I had this question in my head, and I wanted to make sure that I got to it at some point, so we can give everybody a sense of. You mentioned League. You mentioned before. I mean, in a lot of unfortunate ways, not being the stereotypical gamer is not the greatest environment for a lot of people out there, yourself included, probably, unfortunately. But what are your games? What are your go-tos? And what were they growing up? Like, did you start like myself? I have games sitting behind me. These are some of my favorites that I've had over the years.
I noticed.
Yeah, it's
great.
only a couple. It's only a couple. Which is, I don't know. Maybe that's sad. I'm not sure, but which
No, I love it.
are you sort of League focused now, League of Legends focused now, and sort of started with like all the typical Nintendo, Sega stuff growing up? What was sort of the path for you, and where are you now?
Well, I mean, I'm old as the hills, so I played like NES and SNES, all of that growing
Is
up.
that considered
So
old
I've
now?
gone.
Because oh no.
So I grew up with all the old consoles and all the classic games. Obviously, growing up, it was less about the esports. It was more about the adventure games, and Donkey Kong Country definitely had a real good grip on me for a long time. But then it was in university that I discovered League of Legends, and that element of competition was really exciting to me. And I think for me in particular, I love strategy. And so those longer games, especially MOBA, where it's very strategy based, and you have to change based on whether you won early phase or lost it, and what do you
Communication,
do in mid, right?
Yeah.
And really looking at that big picture and pivoting your approach. I love that kind of stuff. So that's always been my favorite. Since then, I was big into like even the LCS, watching all the professional leagues play, and had my favorite players all the way back to season 2.
Nice.
So I'm pretty OG with that stuff. But more recently, you know what? I've been learning so many games and having so much fun. Last year, we had the opportunity to send a Tekken player to World Esports Championships. So I got to learn all about that game. I personally, my experience with fighting games had always been Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat at the arcade growing up.
Yep, same.
So that was
and not being very good at them,
Oh, exactly. Completely. Yeah. So it was fun to learn a new game and just get even listening to how technical they are in the way that they approach their game, where our player, I was chatting with him before one of the matches, and he was explaining to me how he chooses his next move based on how many frames per second that move has, so that he could tell whether he could get in a couple of jabs before a combo, or whether he's like, and the concept of choosing your next move based on frames per second just brought a whole new level of technical skill
and
to
in the
that
moment too.
game
And
for
in
me,
the moment,
right?
Yeah.
Right. It's all real-time decision making, instantaneous. It's absolutely incredible what these folks can do.
Yeah.
And now, like, if I just have a couple minutes to spare, I've really been enjoying Pokemon Unite
Oh
because
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
mobile, cross-platform, 10 minutes. I can, chat with my friends and be like, hey, got 10 minutes?
Yeah. That's it.
It's great. It's so much fun.
You had lots of experience with League. It just reminded me, have you watched Players, the show Players? It is
No, I haven't seen that one.
It's hilarious. So it
really?
is
I'll
a
take a look at that one.
mockumentary about a team going through the LCS ranks. It is amazing.
Oh my gosh. That sounds great.
If you didn't know it was a mockumentary, you'd think it was real with some.
That's so good.
Because everyone's sort of a little bit exaggerated, everyone's a little bit silly,
right,
but also somewhat believable at the same time. It's amazing. It was an NBC show, and it was on their streaming service and stuff. It was out
that's awesome.
Sometime in the summer. It's hilarious. It's filmed just like any kind of documentary would be, and it's like 6 or 7 episodes, and it's them going and qualifying, and then trying to qualify for LCS, all this stuff, and following every individual team member, and so it's amazing. It's so funny.
Well, then the follow-up question is, did you watch Arcane?
Yes, and it's amazing. It's awesome.
Yeah,
that was really good.
And see, for me, that was one of the big things that drew me into League of Legends, is the effort that they put into the artistry of the game. That it's not just a game, it is an entire world that you get to experience immersively and become part of the community. There's the lore, the music, the art, all of it is just so it's such an all-encapsulating experience. It's absolutely breathtaking.
Well, and there's how many characters at this point? I don't play it.
Oh my gosh.
So
so many.
There's so much you can dig into, and everyone has their story. Everyone has their connection with another one, or another 5, or another 25 that they're connected to, and everything. So there's so much. I mean, it's been going on for so long now. I guess they can just keep building the roster and doing that. And I think that something like Arcane, I've dabbled in the game here and there. I've probably played a total of like 30 matches ever, which is nothing. But I didn't need to play the game to enjoy it. I think they just did a really good job of world building. It looked amazing, just on its own, regardless of, if nothing was spoken through the entire show, it would just look great. So there was that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think things like that definitely could bring people in too. I know it did for a couple people I know. They're like, oh, I'm going to give this game a shot, even though I've never played a MOBA before. So that's kind of cool and everything.
Yeah.
Well, Melissa, I want to say thank you very much for joining me and taking the time. And it's an exciting time. Let's watch this stuff
Yeah.
continue to build. Like I think that's what everybody wants, and the gaming community is looking forward to. So this is big news, and I appreciate you coming on and giving the time to talk about it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.